Do your targets look like Swiss cheese? Do you shoot until your fingers bleed, but never seem to improve? Are you tired of inconsistent shooting, but can't figure out how to fix the problem? Does it seem like there's no product that can help? Wrong!
Hey everybody, this is PJ Reilly from Lancaster Archery. Here we wanted to talk to you today about the Pressure Perfect Products SweetSpot Pro. This is a really unique device. It's been out for several months now, and we just wanted to do a tutorial, a rundown of how to set it up, how to use it, what it can benefit for you. And what it is it's a training device and a competition device. It's not legal in all competitions, World Archery, USA Archery. It is not legal in those tournaments, but NFAA, ASA, IBO, it is legal for use in competition there. But what it is a device that utilizes strain gauges mounted on your bow's riser, and it basically tracks the amount of pressure that you're putting into the bow. It measures riser deflection. So consistency is the key to archery. If you can do the same thing time after time, your shots are going to be accurate. So what this device shows you is when you're at full draw, it tracks how you're holding. If you're creeping forward, it's going to show you that. If you're pulling too hard, it's going to show you that. Just a real handy device that even if you're not using it in competition, it's great for training, because with the SweetSpot Pro, there's an app that you're going to use that will show you graphs of your shots to show you your pressures. You can see when you're creeping, you can see when you're pulling too hard. And knowing that, even if you're not going to use the device in competition, can help you in training. Especially if you're working with your coach can see when you're creeping, when you're pulling too hard, just to try and dial in that consistency. A couple archers have been using that, pro archers have been using it in competition, Jesse Broadwater, Donnie Thacker, and they've been doing really well with it. So we just wanted to, as I said, walk through a complete process of setting this up, installing it on your bow, and then more importantly, using it. How do you use this and what can it do for you? So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to mount the sensor to the riser. All right, so the first step of installing the SweetSpot Pro is actually the most important step. We're going to have to take our strain gauge here. You can see this little board. These 4 copper pads on the backside, those are strain gauges. We're going to have to super glue this to the riser, and that connection is critical for how this product will function. You notice at the top it's got a little USB port there. That's what we're going to connect it to the unit to get all of our readings. What SweetSpot tells us is that we want to be near the grip. Matthews, I have the TRX 38 here. There is an absolutely perfectly flat spot here on the front of the riser. I messaged Jesse Broadwater. He's been shooting with this for a while. I asked him, hey, where do you mount your strain gauges on your bow? And he said right here on the front, so I'm going to put mine in exactly where he told me to put it. But again, we want to make sure we get a good contact with the strain gauge to the riser. We're going to super glue it on there. I'm going to walk you through that process, and what they recommend is, I'm just going to turn the bow up like this. So this is where I'm going to mount it. I want to make sure it's flat. Again, this is a nice flat surface. So they recommend taking a piece of clear packing tape. So we're going to take the sensor, strain gauge sensor, and I'm going to tape it onto the riser in order to get it set first. And my tape, you'll notice, I left extra material on the bottom. You can see there the sensor. This is going to act as a hinge once I get it set where I want it on my riser. So I'm going to say centered, looks good, right about there. Okay, so what I did is I pressed on the bottom here, and now that is going to be my hinge. So that's going to be all set up. So now that my sensor is set, in your box you're going to get a packet of super glue, and they want you to use this glue. It's a one-time use product only. I'm going to put some glue on each of the sensors, each of the strain gauges, and then I'm going to put some extra glue at the top. So we'll go slow here so you can see exactly what I'm doing, but I'll fold this back. So as I said, I'm going to put a good spot of glue on each of the gauges here. They tell me more is better than less, so I'm going to make sure I get a good amount of glue on each one of these, because that's what we want to have good contact with the riser. We don't want any air bubbles. Got that there. Now up at the top here, I'm going to put in some extra. Okay, so I've got all the glue on there. Now I'm just going to reverse the hinge over. I'm going to press down. Now I've got my tape holding it in place, and I've got my super glue on there. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take some electrician's tape, and I'm going to wrap it around there to hold it in place. I chose white so it matches my bow. You can do whatever you want there. But the first couple of wraps, I just want it to be a little bit light. I don't want to pull tight yet. So I'm just going around to make sure that the contact is good across the sensor. And then when I come back, now I can make it tight to tighten it down. I'm pulling this tape tight across to make sure I get good contact so those gauges are nice and solid against the riser. So when you are taping the sensor to your riser, when you put the tape over it, you're going to want to make sure that you run the tape over top the bottom of the micro USB. Obviously you need to leave the very top where the opening is, you have to leave that clear so you can plug in your wire, but you're going to want to get your tape over as much of that USB as possible just to eliminate any possibility of it separating from your riser. So there you see that on there. My USB's up at the top. I can plug that in, run my wires around to the unit, and I am ready to go. Now, once we glued this into place, we want to let this sit for an hour before we do anything. All right, so we have waited an hour, more than an hour actually, and our sensor is mounted. It's got the tape wrapped around it, electrical tape. I'm going to leave that there for protection. We've got the USB port sticking out the top. So in the box with your SweetSpot, you're going to get a cord that has two USB connections. One of these obviously is going to go into that end there eventually when we set everything up. So you want to make sure you have access to that USB port. Now, mounting everything to your scope is going to depend a lot on which sight you have. So I have the Shrewd Optum here. I have a two-step sunshade on the front, and I have the Optum 5-power lens on the back. This setup, the SweetSpot's going to work with any sight, but how you mount everything within the scope, that's going to vary from scope to scope. So I'm just going to have to show you how it works with the Shrewd Optum. But in your pack, besides the double USB cord, you're also going to get this device here. Now, what you have is one end has a USB connection that goes into this card. And this is actually going to be the light that goes inside your scope housing. It's hard to see, but these two little dots right here, one of them is a green light and one of them is a red light. And we're going to mount this board inside the scope housing. Now for me, in my scope, you can see in there that I shoot a pin. So I use a light on that. Even for indoor target archery, this is the setup that I use. I use a lighted pin for aiming. So I need a sight light. One of the great things about the SweetSpot is that it also will operate the light for your fiber pin. And that is this device right here. It also connects into the same card that has your red and green lights. It just connects on to one side. If you shoot a dot and you don't shoot a light at all, you can just take this off and then you don't need it. All you need is your red and green lights. But as we said, I shoot a sight light, so I need that connected in. The threads here will fit most of the sight light housings on most of the scopes. It's going to fit in there. So something I'd recommend is just kind of dry fitting everything before you permanently attach everything. One of the first things you're going to have to decide is whether or not you want your red and green lights to be mounted on the top of the scope or the bottom of the scope. For me, with my level and a fixed pin inside there, I can't mount on the bottom, so the top is my only option. But you're going to want to be able to see those red and green lights, because that's what's going to tell you if you're holding at the correct amount of pressure or if you're pulling too much, etc. That the system relies on those red and green lights, so you're going to need those somewhere within here. So we're just going to run through how I mount this on the Shrewd Optum, which fortunately Shrewd has this little Allen sort of a porthole here, and that just comes right out, and that's going to be my wire access. Now all my wires are going to go in there. Of course, right here is where my sight light is going to mount, and so I'm going to get my cords to go in there. So I'm going to take off my two-step shade as well as my lens, just so I have easy access to the front and the back while I'm installing this. Now my hands can go in both sides. All right, so now I'm going to mount my red and green light card inside the scope. I have everything apart so I can have access inside. And one thing I found out is that I have to thread my wires through the hole to get them to the card, so I actually have to detach them first from the wires. Then I can take, so I'm going to work with the sight light first, and the light has this, sort of rubberized cup on the outside here, just for protection. What you're going to want to do is take that off to mount the light, just because so you can fold that wire out flat. With it tucked up against there, it's a little hard to work with, I found. So I have that out. Now it'll spin a lot easier to mount onto the receiver. Once I have that snug, I can fold the wire back up, put the protective cover back on there. Now I'm going to run my wire through the hole. That's for my sight light. I'm going to take my other wire. This one is the one that operates the red and green lights. And I'm going to run that through. Now I can connect everything to my board before I mount it. Okay, and as we said, we're just going to, this is just a practice fitting to see if I like it. If it turns out I like it, all I have to do is pop this out, take off that protective covering, and I can tape it right to the top of the scope. But for right now, this is just temporary. So I'm get this positioned in the center of the top. Okay, you can see that is now set in there. Obviously my light wire, I don't want that blocking anything, so I'm just going to tuck that behind the bubble there. Okay, now you'll see those wires inside there, but as soon as I put on my two-step shade, those wires are far less visible in there. They're not as much of an obstruction as you might think. Don't want to forget to put my lens back on. Okay, so now my wires are ready, and now I'm ready to go and mount this on the bow. So my sight's just going to go in like it normally does. Get that locked down. And what I've already determined is that for me, I need to mount my unit on the back half of my sight bar there. It's just not a good fit there with the surfaces I have available. So I'm going to mount it back here. And in the box, you're going to get a piece of Velcro that is nice and handy. Just goes in one side and around the other. But I'm going to tell you that I have found this is not terribly secure. It's very loose. It does hold it into one spot, but it's just not as secure as I would like it. Okay, so that's as tight as I can get it with this Velcro, and you can see that's not very tight at all. So what I did was I just got two other pieces of Velcro that I'm going to put on each side to make this more secure. You can get this Velcro pretty much anywhere. Okay, so now you can see with that Velcro, this is a lot more secure. Once I have my wires in, it's going to be even more secure, but this is certainly a lot more stable, and I still have access to all of my controls on the front here. So as we mentioned, we got our black USB cord that connects the sensor. So we're going to connect this here to make sure you got it going in the right way. All right, and I'm going to take my wire and run it through here. I'm going to bring it out the back. This, of course, this is my sensor, so it's conveniently labeled here. Let me turn the bow around. One side says sensor, and the other side says charge. So I obviously want this to go in the sensor port. There. So we've got that. Now we have the wire that's connecting my card and is also operating my sight light. I want to wind this back and connect into this port right here. Obviously I want it to be out of the way of my sight picture and my arrow. So I'm going to run it, I'm going to wrap it around the back of the sight like this and just connect it in here. All right, so everything is now connected. In the packet, you're going to get a couple of zip ties. You can make this a lot more, beautiful to get these wires out of the way by zip tying them down. Remember, this is just our dry fit to make sure we like everything. But before we did all this, before we use the unit, you want to make sure you charge it. So as we said, there's the charge port on the back here. Now, when you charge it, you can charge it, run it off of a computer, or you can get a plug that goes into the wall. But the thing you want to make sure of is don't use one of the fast charging cords. That's a phone charger that is, it's done to get your phone to a charge faster than a normal cord. Don't use those. I've personally learned through trial and error that that can burn up the sensor. You want a normal, standard USB charging cord. That's what you want to use to charge your unit. Once it is fully charged, you get several hours out of it, so it does the job. But now we have everything attached. And so it's time to calibrate it. And in order to calibrate it, we have to put the bow back together. You need all your stabilizers on it, however you're gonna shoot it, that's what you want on the bow. All right, so I have my front stabilizer, my rear stabilizer on, so we're ready to calibrate. One thing you wanna make sure is if you have a bow pod, make sure it is off when you calibrate. You're gonna wanna calibrate this anytime you make any change. This is my current target setup. If I add some weights, I would want to recalibrate this unit. If I did anything to change my draw length, twisted the cables or whatever, I would want to recalibrate because you want it to be set to the setup that you're going to be shooting. So this is what I'm going to shoot. So first thing I'm going to do is turn the unit on right here, and you'll see it went to a number, okay? So I want this to say calibrate. So what I want to do is, so if you turn this unit on and you don't see the word calibrate, what you're going to want to do is turn it off, and then this is your up button and this is your down button. So you want to press both of those at the same time and then turn on the unit, hold to reset, reset done. Now it says calibrate. So now I am ready to go. And the calibration is basically you're zeroing the unit. So what you want to do to make sure it's consistent every time that you calibrate it is you want to hold the bow in a unique way. And you want to kind of do it so that you're not influencing, you're getting these strain gauges measure riser deflection. So you don't want to have any hand torque into it. So what I like to do with the Matthews bow is I just hold it right there. The bow is hanging. So now I'm going to hit the select button where it says calibrate. That's right here. I hit that and I let it go until it says fire shot. Then I'm going to have to go out to the range and take a shot just to give it its first reading. All right, now we're going to fire our shot to get the calibration. So now what that's set for us is the optimum value. You can see in there it says 714. That's just a starting point, 714. Now I'm going to take a bunch of shots, keep reviewing the data and see what looks good, and I can change any of those numbers. If it feels like I should be holding more, I can increase the optimum value. If it feels like I should be holding less, I can decrease it. And what that does is it changes when the green light comes on and goes off and when the red light comes on. Right now I have an 11-point variation, so it's going to stay green if I'm anywhere within from 714 to 725. Anywhere in there the light's going to be green. If I go over 725 it's going to turn red. If I go under 714 the lights are all going to go out. And so that's how you play with making sure that you are exerting the same pressure on every shot. I want to stay in that green. Another feature built into this is the shot timer, and you can see I've got it here. Shot timer is set at 15. That's 15 seconds. If I am holding for 15 seconds, the lights in my scope are going to start to blink. And basically I'm setting that time length for what I feel comfortable. If I'm holding for more than 15 seconds, for me, my shot starts to break down. So it's kind of like once the lights blink, it's okay. If I keep holding, then I know that my shot's going to break down. Maybe I want to let down at that point. And you can change that. You can set that to whatever you want, whatever works for you, 10 seconds, 20 seconds, whatever. 15 seconds just seems to be good for me. So that's another feature built in there just to keep that consistency. One feature of the Pro model is that you have the box here connects to an app that's on your phone. It's a Wi-Fi connection between your phone and here. You don't have to use any external Wi-Fi. As you scroll through the menu, you'll find the Wi-Fi location. When you turn your phone on, turn your Wi-Fi settings on, you're just going to search for that. Then the next screen would be the unique password on your box. I have a unique password on here. I just put in that password to that Wi-Fi connection. Once I do that, then I can open a website on my phone where I can track the data. I can see graphs, I can see charts of all my shots. It's a real handy feature to see what you're doing and where things are working the best for you. There's even a real-time graph where someone can watch, your coach can sit there and watch and monitor how you're holding, and then, you know, if they see something that needs to be fixed, that's where they're going to know, all right, you know, this shot went low. Well, halfway through the hold, you kind of crept forward a little bit. It's just going to give you all that data so you can monitor everything that you did in your shot. That's on the app. That's the value of that. All your history, you can review all your shots to see how you're doing. So I've spent about the last week playing with the SweetSpot on my bow, just shooting it, familiarizing myself with it, seeing what it can do for me. And the thing that impressed me is when I initially set it up, my holding pressure, I was all over the map. There was almost no consistency. I'm not a professional archer, I just shoot for fun. But obviously I want to get better. And so I started out with a wide tolerance on my settings so that my optimum value and my peak value were pretty far apart, maybe 20-point values. And what I noticed is I started shrinking that down. And as I was doing that, it forced me to make my release when I was in the optimum value. I got it down to where I'm only 4 points. So my green light comes on, and if I creep up 4 points higher than that, the red light comes on. And what I noticed is that as I shrunk that down, if I was able to stay in that green light, my shooting started getting a lot better. If I was in that green zone, more likely than not, I was shooting 11s on classic scoring. So I think my scores went up a little bit, but I haven't really shot a lot of rounds yet to kind of work on that. And I think if I practice more on that, keeping my pressure consistent, I think I'm going to get better. So, and that's all we can ask for. If it's going to help me do that, hey, it works for me. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up. If you want to see more videos like it, subscribe to our YouTube channel. And as always, if you have any questions, you can visit us at lancasterarchery.com.